Thanks again for joining us. I am also really excited to hear from our speaker today, Stephen May, as I think he will be addressing an issue that many of us might have noticed or experienced through your work or even through your personal life, and that is the digital divide. As the pandemic has forced many services to change the format of the service delivery and moved into an online format, the fact that many people are yet to be included or have access to technology is a real area of concern. Stephen May is the regional coordinator at Leep. Leep is an organization that enables people to use technology in this digital world. And in particular, they support various groups to build skills and confidence to get online and participate to a digital world. Stephen, thank you so much for joining us. Over to you.
Thanks, Lauren. Thank you for the welcome, and thank you to your side for the invitation to present this morning. I'd like to commence by acknowledging the traditional owners of our lands and the elders past, present and emerging, especially those of the Wiradjuri lands from where I'm speaking. And I look forward to a shared future based upon inclusion and the principles of social justice. I'd like to preface my presentation with some news that Leep will be actually rebranding very soon. I can't provide you with the specific details of our new branding, but it will focus on our core operations of developing digital literacy. You'll still, however, be able to keep up to date by checking out our current website, which is leep.org. That's LEEP. .ngo for updates and any redirection. So that's leep.ngo. As you've heard, my name's Stephen May, and I'm here to introduce you to Leep and to encourage you to engage in our program. Personally, my professional background is in education, primary schools, universities, and the TAFE and post-school sector. And in that latter context, I've worked with not-for-profit organisations in the provision of educational programs. And some of you will be familiar with the federally funded C program, with which I was involved for a number of years. And now my other commitment aside from Leap is with some support work in TAFE. So it seems that joining Leap was a natural progression for me, as it combines my experience both in support programs and in the educational sector. My actual educational background is a BA Dip Ed from Macquarie, a Masters of Sustainable Management from the University of Sydney, and a graduate cert in University in Leadership and Management from CSU. But on top of that, real world experience as a husband, father and grandfather. Leap's goals and mission relate closely to what we've already highlighted. But as I mentioned in my acknowledgement of country, I'm optimistic that we can make use of the current circumstances to look towards an increasingly positive future for all our society, a future that addresses the outstanding needs of all disadvantaged and disenfranchised groups. People disadvantaged by the expectation placed upon them because of their culture, heritage and language, for instance, First Nations people, refugees, recent arrivals, physical disability and health, those who are judged by their physical disabilities instead of their actual abilities. People who have expectations put upon them because of mental health situations, and generalised judgments and expectations that go with that. And importantly for us, people who have expectations placed upon them because of their age, where we tend to, well, not we, but people tend to generalise and think because people are of a certain age, they're either disengaged or not capable of engaging. And as a consequence of all of these, or due to other factors, socioeconomic disadvantage, which is across all of those sectors, And that's the social disadvantage through marginalisation and economic disadvantage that emerges from lessened opportunity to participate financially. And in terms of digital engagement, that's where we see ourselves being able to make a significant contribution and difference. My presentation today will provide you with a background to Leep, or whatever it becomes, as an organisation aiming to address components of the disadvantaged experience, particularly by seniors in our society. A society that is coming to grips with the changes wrought by the impact of COVID, impacts that we continue to respond to, and no doubt we'll have to do that well into the future. That's why I thought maybe the title of this presentation, which I actually selected, Digital Access and Inclusion Beyond COVID-19, was perhaps too optimistic. Maybe it should be, not necessarily beyond, but working with COVID. Because will there ever be a time that is truly beyond COVID, or just a time when we've learned to operate effectively within the constraints that are placed upon us by COVID? Our response to COVID has emphasised and increased society's reliance on digital technology and created and will continue to extend the disadvantage experienced by individuals with minimal or no digital skills. And I'm sure we can all look around us and see people in various sectors in the community who are disadvantaged because they don't have the digital skills or opportunities through provision of devices to actually participate fully in society. And, I look to members in my own family who, for any number of reasons, haven't engaged with digital technology and function on function in a way that they have done for the last 80 years, and in terms of reliance on face-to-face, and there's nothing wrong with that, but in terms of delivery in society, sometimes that's just not feasible or possible any longer. And at the same time, we see people who are, seniors who are fully engaged. I was speaking to a lady at 81 yesterday who already uses her iPhone and her iPad effectively, but had just got a new MacBook Pro and wanted to learn how to use that to do her emails and pay her bills. So we're looking at someone who's integrated all of those new technologies into their lives, and there are lots of people, I'm sure, who have done that, but at the same time there are lots of people, particularly seniors, who have not had that opportunity. Okay, and Leep endeavours to continually address those disadvantages, and particularly that disadvantage relating to the digital divide. And I'll go on to define what the digital divide is shortly. I'll provide an outline of the directions we see Leep taking in the near future as a response to the impact of COVID-19 restrictions and limitations, and also the relevance of collaborations in reaching our goals and possibly those with partner organisations. I'll go on to outline the processes that we undertake to both recruit digital mentors and also link them for one-to-one delivery with learners. Disenfranchised members of society, particularly seniors, suffer from increased disadvantage through finding themselves on the wrong side of this digital divide. The digital divide refers to the gap in opportunities to access information and communication technologies. And it was identified specifically in an OECD report back in 2001 of understanding the digital divide. So the actual concept and recognition of the challenge has been there for 20 years. People with low levels of income, education, and employment are significantly less likely to be digitally included. And that comes from a Telstra study undertaken by Swinburne University measuring Australia's digital divide. That was about 5 years ago that they did that. So already disadvantaged and vulnerable, these people are at increased risk of compounding their existing disadvantage. At Leep, we strive to address this by supporting disadvantaged members of society, particularly seniors, to develop their confidence and skills in using smartphones, tablets, as well as desktop computers. And also, obviously, laptops. And I mentioned, by way of example, the senior lady who was using her iPhone, but in saying that, we also, we deal with all different products, so we're not just an Apple-focused organisation.
Stephen, sorry, it's Abby here. Can I interrupt for a second?
Yeah,
Do you know
certainly.
that your slides aren't showing at the moment?
I'm going to come to the slides later.
Oh, great. Excellent. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
That's all right.
Thanks, Stephen.
That's okay. This is just my talking bit. I figured that everyone gets tired of just seeing slides when spoken to. So in the meantime, you can check out my bookshelves. And,
perfect.
Just
thank you, Stephen.
See what's sitting behind me.
Thank you.
Okay, that's all right. There will be some slides coming in a little while. Okay, at Leep, we strive to address this by supporting disadvantaged members of society, and particularly seniors, to develop their confidence and skills, which I just said, but using devices. We have volunteer tech mates who provide one-to-one support in assisting learners to make better use of their devices for messaging, face-to-face calls, emails, photos, attachments, etc. And for some people, it's develops right into a confidence in doing online banking and shopping. Although there is a certain level of resistance to that level of engagement, as we can understand. At Leep, we're constantly endeavouring to expand our delivery model and services through drawing on various funding sources and collaborations with other organisations. Mentoring is increasingly seen as a means of reaching those of greatest need in society beyond the formal provision of social services. And that was identified in an ABS study in 2019. Digital mentoring offers an effective model for improving digital skills and literacy with long-term sustained results. And there was a Australian Digital Inclusion Index in 2016, again by Swinburne University of Technology, that was undertaken for Telstra, that was measuring Australia's digital divide. Leap's mentoring programs thereby provide an ongoing, comprehensive response to digital literacy in Australia. Our replicable, scalable delivery model is based on nearly 3 decades of experience of enabling people to use technology. Mobilising civic engagement, we train our volunteers to become digital mentors or tech mates, which is our branding of the role. Tech mates are trained to be flexible and adaptive enough to adapt to each learner's capability through a guided learning program that can accommodate diverse learner needs, as identified by Gatti, Brivio and Galimberti in a 2017 article that was entitled "The Future is Ours Too, a training process to enable the learning perception and increase self-efficacy in the use of tablets in the elderly." And that appeared in a magazine or a publication called Educational Gerontology. So there's lots of research backing up what we do, and identifying the specific needs that are there. To explain further, context matters for mentoring. This includes not only taking into account language barriers and cultural differences, but also platforms, devices, and online activities with which specific learners need to engage. For instance, elderly Chinese immigrants may have language challenges and cultural barriers to overcome while developing digital skills, but also need specific assistance with Chinese-specific platforms such as WeChat and Weibo. And that's the case for other cultural groups as well. Similarly, working with remote Aboriginal communities requires local knowledge, language and cultural sensitivity, often missing in standardised online resources and programs. Rigid systems, funding programs and resources don't always work. Our tech mates act as a front line for digital skills development, helping learners to improve their digital ability on a one-to-one basis. In return, we provide our tech mates with ongoing training and support and access to shared resources. Leep bases its delivery of support for its learners on the skills of our volunteer tech mates, as well as their undoubted commitment. I'm now going to provide you with some details specifically about Leep by sharing my screen. So I'll just get everything set up. So as you can see,
yes, we can, Stephen.
Sorry, you can see that?
Yes, we can.
Right. As you can see, we operate programs to support people to build their digital skills and close the digital divide. And again, here we see the the structure of Leep and how it's based on the principles of being evidence-based, all of those principles that you see up above that result in the outcomes in the lower portion of that circle. Now, there were 2.5 million Australians who are not online. It'd be interesting to see, this is 2017 data, so it'd be interesting to see how this has changed, but it's still a significant proportion. And the impacts of not being online now would even be more considerable for individuals than in 2017. And we can see here that digital literacy declines with age, and particularly 70 plus. And I'm sure as you increase the age bracket, that pie chart would certainly change in shape with the low engagement or low skill level increasing as the age increases. It's already apparent from that 50 to 69 and then the 70 plus. So we're looking at making a difference in an area where there is significant disadvantage. So what are the barriers to being online? We talked about this earlier. So there's the barriers of access, both the availability and affordability. And some of that, I mean, we were talking just before the presentation about the impact of homeschooling and access to the internet by families, and families who perhaps are not in a positive financial situation, and having to find alternatives for internet services to the home service. So finding a library or somewhere where there's free services, and the impact on the physical impact on the actual ability to have an effective learning environment. So access remains a significant issue. The actual skills, and this is what we find particularly with seniors who are unfamiliar with what's required, the language, the actual manipulation of devices. And sometimes it's just a very simple way of just engaging with it and, guiding them towards what their desired outcomes and develop their skills. The actual motivation, so the awareness of the benefits of being online and, the time saving that can be achieved through doing activities online, the reduced effort in terms of finding out information, and if they're banking online, just paying bills and the facilities that many of us just take for granted. And perhaps one of the biggest barriers, particularly for seniors, is trust. Okay, and knowing that there are safety mechanisms in place and security and feeling confident online. And I think that's perhaps the biggest hurdle or barrier that we're looking at sometimes, with people going, I just can't do that. I'm not willing to do that. So it's giving them the confidence and reassurance that the risks aren't as great as they perhaps perceive. Okay, we all know the benefits of being online, but it's important that we highlight to the people we're dealing with what the benefits can be, and particularly with lockdowns, that social connection is perhaps more important than we would have thought of a few years ago. And, you know, that can amount to the use of Skype, FaceTime, and various other face-to-face communication. Continued education, just finding out more about things that they're interested in, and hobbies or interests. Leisure activities, again, I'm reading what's there, but you can see all of those that impact on, mostly impact positively on our lives because we make use of them. But then for seniors and for disenfranchised people, sometimes this is not these benefits aren't accessible. So Leep sees the importance of making that accessibility available. Okay, the common topics that we help learners with are, first of all, perhaps going to that bottom line, getting to know your device, just feeling comfortable with the capabilities of your device and using the capabilities that work for you rather than pushing people beyond what they're comfortable with or what they need. So it's just getting to being comfortable and being familiar with your device. Then, sending emails, texting. I had one gentleman in one group who said, my family's given me a phone, I can make calls on it. He didn't know how to text, and so it was a matter of guiding him towards how he could text and then building on that. Sometimes it's just a matter of managing photos and files, but also like attaching them to emails and, how to make use of those, accessing the internet as well, and valuable apps that they can download. Again, there's that level of skepticism and caution with apps that sometimes we just need to move people past. There's nothing wrong with caution, but I think it's just that risk management that's critical. And highlighting, online activities that'll save them time and money. And again, accessing government service, and perhaps that's the most evident one there is the Service New South Wales app, and logging in and accessing their vaccination record. And we've established we've done that with different groups, particularly in the current circumstances. And we've also developed a resource that I'll show you later that helps with that, which we're still developing, but that helps. Online banking and paying bills, that depends on the comfort level of the actual participant. And then obviously the researching and buying goods online. Okay, so the Leep model is based on one-to-one delivery and tailored support for each person. It can be self-guided learning if that's what that person needs. So just encouraging them to move forward and how they can do it. And some people are highly motivated. So that one obviously relates to motivation levels. It's perhaps the one-to-one delivery that sets Leep aside. We tend not to do things, it may be a larger group, but there might be sufficient. Well, the idea is that there are tech mates there to work through on a one-to-one and with the person's own device, rather than sitting somewhere at a device that they're not familiar with, quite often a desktop computer, and then having to translate those skills from it to a different device with completely different operational requirements. And just on that one-to-one and personal devices, we're actually looking at some funding at the moment, and we're optimistic that we've been successful, where we'll actually, obviously for not huge numbers, but for some of our cohorts, we'll actually provide the devices, which will enable them to keep them with them and make use of them. But as I say, that's pending outcomes of some funding that we've applied for. And just in terms of that, we're looking at funding not just from government bodies, but also philanthropic bodies as well, to help us, really make a difference. We can also do remote delivery. That's not a preferred option, obviously, for a lot of our a lot of our learners, they'd much prefer face-to-face. So when we contact them and said, do you want to, we have options to offer you remote support or face-to-face. Most of them said they prefer to wait until face-to-face was available again. And any device. So basically we're looking at, as I've said before, smartphones, tablets and laptops. Desktops obviously are more of a challenge because they're not as portable. Okay, so as you can see from the reference down the bottom, there's a significant portion of over 50s prefer that one-to-one mentoring in digital literacy. You can just see it can make such a difference when you're working with someone and you just show them some very simple tasks that we take for granted. And sometimes it's going right back to the basic. I was in one group the other day when, the lady had her smartphone out and could barely see it. And it was just really a matter of going in and adjusting the brightness of the screen. But it was just on a preset setting. So she was squinting trying to see the screen. So just one simple action made a huge difference for that one person. Okay, our main areas of operation for face-to-face delivery is Western Sydney, Nepean and Hawkesbury Blue Mountains, as well as Western New South Wales. So that's the Central West where I'm based, and Orana Far West, which extends from Mudgee to beyond Dubbo. We are working towards, and I have to say working towards, particularly in that western area, that far western area, building up our resources of tech mates. But this is where, if needs be, we can use remote delivery as an option. So I realise some of you may fall within this area, some of you may not fall within this area, but it gives you an indication, and the option is always there for remote delivery. And hopefully we'll be looking at expanding our delivery areas. So we reach potential learners through general publicity, flyers. I'll let you read those. Perhaps the important one there in relation to this meeting is building collaborations with other providers, service club and communities or organisations. So we have some relationships with some community centres, some hack centres in Western Sydney and in regional areas. And quite often those partnerships really enable us to reach a significant cohort. And a lot of that is tied in with CHSP funding. Okay, and just spreading the word is, I think, important, and that's where an opportunity like this morning has been terrific. So organisations can undertake referrals, and that's through our website, and that will remain regardless of what title is seen on, what branding we have. But learners can also self-refer, so they don't have to just refer through organisations or have organisations do it on their behalf. What I'll do is, this presentation will be available later, so I'll also attach our flyers as well, and they provide contact details and mechanisms for referral. And I'll also put a flyer there for recruiting tech mates, because we're always after people who are willing to give their time, be it just for 1 hour a week or whatever, to whatever level they're comfortable. So you can see there that we have a number of approaches for recruiting tech mates. But perhaps collaborations is another one where we've been approaching service clubs and community organisations to encourage their members to actually volunteer, and particularly for service clubs that can be fit in with their ethos very effectively. So you can see where we're the mechanisms we use to recruit tech mates. So when someone approaches us to be a learner, we find out where they are, what their specific device is, and what they want to achieve out of it, and if they've got any special requirements in terms of mobility. So we had a contact the other day from one lady who has 2 cochlear implants. So obviously that's going to require specific requirements, and including digital requirements, because the phone is set up to help her with her calls, but also it's actually going to be a word processing program that goes with it. So this is where we can really help and collaborate in reaching a positive outcome. So really it's we can discuss where they'd like to be receive their support and what time, and that's where TechMates liaise with the learner and work out mutually beneficial locations and times, and quite often it's a coffee shop or a library. And we can also just see if there's any possible support funding through My Aged Care or SHSP that can be accessed through that person's participation. Okay, so when we're recruiting new TechMates, obviously it's a matter of finding out where they are in terms of face-to-face delivery, what their skill areas are, and what devices they're comfortable with, and if they have any special needs. We provide two components in training: a general introduction to Leep, but also then there's a procedural induction component, and that's dealing, how to record on the database, because that's all part of the reporting is essential, obviously, in our funding model. They're required to do a police check and fit to work processes. So once those are completed and they've done the procedural induction, they're then online. And we provide access to ongoing support, learning and development for them. New learners are paired with TechMates whose skills and attributes best match the need of the learner. And sometimes that setting is in a hub, so it can be, as I said, in a, for instance, in a hack centre that we have, or that we have an association with, and it might be multiple TechMates going in and helping people on a one-to-one basis. And that's the whole thing, is making sure that it is that one-to-one. And even if someone, there might be 2 learners to each TechMate will work with one person, or with both if that's appropriate, but can work with one person and leave the other then to, once they've got some guidance, work out what they're doing. When sessions are completed, we log them on our database, as I said, but that facilitates reporting to our funding bodies, and that obviously is helps our income stream. And TechMates schedule further sessions as they want. So they might go, look, I'm right now, I'll give you a call in a couple of weeks if I find out there's something else I need. And finally, what does the future hold for Leep? Well, it's certainly going to be a new name. And it will involve the name will involve the term digital literacy. The board is meeting and just deciding where that direction, or where that naming, what the new name will be. And we'll look at, obviously recalibration of our delivery model, because it's constantly, the needs are changing, along with lockdowns and, the impact of increased social isolation. And that's obviously our goal, is to reduce that as much as possible. And as I highlighted earlier, we're developing our funding models to broaden the range of potential sources of income, which I think is beholden on lots of organisations in this day and age. And I also highlighted earlier that we're looking at funding for the provision of devices to special groups of learners. And also, what does the future hold for Leep? Well, it's reliant upon the enthusiasm and positivity from the dedicated staff, and that's very evident to me in my role, and the people in Leep with whom I interact, that everyone is there not just for a job but to make a difference. And I think that that's really, really quite critical. So I'll stop sharing my screen now and just go back to just finish off my delivery. Just before we do move on to questions, I'd like to thank you all for participating today, and I hope that the information I've provided you has been useful. I'd like to thank your side for organising the webinar and inviting me to present, Loran for the introduction, and Abby for the technical support. I look forward to answering any questions that you may have and encourage you to check out our current website, which is leep.ngo. So that's leep.ngo. Although our branding may be changing, our website will direct you to information about our services and how we can be contacted. Our core functions will remain, but as we recalibrate our structure and delivery, further enhancements can be expected. It's been really good to have the opportunity to share this time with you, and I hope that we see some valuable contacts and possibly collaborations emerge. And seeing as it's December, I can actually say this now. I take this opportunity to wish you all the well for the approaching festive season and for 2022, which will be upon us before we know it. It's scary, isn't it? Hasn't this year just flown? So thanks again. I hope that this has been of value to you, and I look forward to answering any questions, and any that I can't answer, I'll certainly make sure that I get a reply to you.
Thank you so much, Stephen. And thank you for your presentation and about digital inclusion and access with COVID-19 and not beyond COVID-19, because I think you're right. It will be with us for some time, so we need to plan for the future with COVID in mind. I was very surprised to hear the figure that you provided. 2.5 million Australians are not online, and that's I think we tend to forget that it's a big figure.
Yep. And they tend to be forgotten. Not just the number, but those people, are being forgotten.
And that brings me to a question which that I wanted to ask you, Stephen. What is the most common problem accessing digital support for vulnerable populations? And how do you think we, as a sector or service providers, we can all work together to address or fix that?
Yep. I think there's an assumption of universal access to the internet, and I think that that's an assumption we need to challenge and ensure, first of all, that when we're talking to people about it, that not just assume that they as individuals have access to the internet. So first of all, making sure that we know their specific circumstances and are familiar with their specific circumstances. The other thing is having devices, and some people say, I've got a mobile phone, but quite often it's just not capable of a lot of the functions that we expect, and that are automatically expected. So I think, and that's why we're looking at the provision of some devices ourselves. Obviously, that's only going to be a very small, fraction, but it's enabling some people access that they don't have. So I think for everyone, it's a matter of just being aware of the limitations that individuals sit within, and not be governed by assumptions that everything is universal for them and access is universal.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Stephen, for that. We have another question here from Samantha, who's asking about your mentors.
Yep.
So thank you for your presentation. How is mentoring promoted to potential mentors? And does the time commitment vary on the volunteer?
Yep. So I'll start at the second part. The time commitment can vary from just an hour a week, if that's what they're willing to do, to whatever level they're willing to participate. And obviously, you know, with all the shutdowns, all the face-to-face delivery was impacted considerably. So we're really working at regaining traction with our cohorts. And obviously now we've got Christmas and the interruptions there. So, and put on top of that rebranding. So for us, we're looking at you know, getting a lot more traction into, you know, in the new year. So time commitment is just what works for individual tech mates. In terms of recruiting tech mates, and that's where I said, you know, in speaking to different service groups, you know, I've received a positive response there with levels of interest in terms of as a community service. So it's a matter of targeting existing service providers as well. Word of mouth is also important, because I'm finding that depending on the age cohort, but most of our tech mates are either working in jobs that allow them a bit of flexibility, or are retirees, and recent retirees who are comfortable with digital technology. So we we'll hit local media. I know for here in Orange, where I am, we've accessed one of the local free newspapers and had a feature article, and we'll do, you know, we do that elsewhere as well, social media as well, and our, you know, through our website and Facebook page. So it's really just a matter of as many different directions as we can take without spreading ourselves too thinly, but trying to capture potential interest wherever we can. And also just directing people to the website, because there are provisions there and links to where you can actually sign up. So yeah, as I've said before, regardless of the name, that website will continue to provide those links and connections. So, and I think addressing, you know, groups like this as well, it's important. It just puts it out there, and people being aware that they can recommend it to other people and say, look, I've, you know, just heard about this program where you can actually volunteer. And even though I've mentioned the 81-year-old lady who was fully engaged with her phone and her tablet, but wanted to master her laptop. I mean, I could see the value in her then moving on to being a tech mate and supporting her. And she said, as soon as I said that, she said, "Oh, I wanted to volunteer." So that's where it's a matter of capturing the interest.
So thank you for your response, Stephen. I hope that responds to your question, Samantha. I have a follow-up question about what you just said. So if one of our service providers who's listening to this webinar is aware of one of their clients who might benefit from Leep support, how does that work? Do they contact Leep directly, or do they need? You might have mentioned that earlier, but
they can go to the website, and there's a referral mechanism there to refer learners, and you can do that as a third party. As I say, our main face-to-face delivery is Western Sydney, Nepean, Blue Mountains, Hawkesbury, and the Central West and Arana Far West. So we just have to be mindful, and our funding is sort of based on delivery in those areas. So it can depend on the area where you are. But the other thing is too the potential for remote delivery, and you know, that's something where I can see potential, but that's very much people feeling comfortable. And I think with the cohort we're looking at, that can be a bit of a challenge.
Yes, thank you. I have another question from Danielle, who's asking, what are the main concerns of older people in accessing technology? How do we support them to overcome these concerns?
Yep. So I think part of the problem is that those of us who are comfortable with digital just make the assumption that it's easy.
Yes.
So I think the first thing is to get over that assumption that although it may be easy for us as people who are engaged with digital technology, for someone who's not familiar, it is hugely daunting. I also think there's an embedded mistrust, distrust with and skepticism about the value of it. Even to the point where, for my mother-in-law, we gave her a digital radio, and because she was having trouble with her other one, and it came back because she just couldn't get it to work. And she's someone who, as I think I said earlier, doesn't have a mobile phone and relies on lots of face-to-face interactions. So really, it's a matter of overcoming that lack of confidence and that skepticism. And I think that's not something you can do quickly. It's just a matter of guiding them to it. The other thing we've found is, and I've got to be careful how I say this, but a lot of our seniors prefer to deal with other, not necessarily seniors, but people who haven't grown up with technology. So, people perhaps like myself who've, through my role and jobs have grown with digital technology. So I'm not a digital native, because I think, there are people who just have always had, it's just always been there. It's just a huge component of their lives, and don't realise that for a long time it just wasn't there. So I think that's another way of just treading lightly. I think that would be the biggest, most significant way of helping, rather than, like we just sending off that digital radio. Obviously, we didn't tread lightly. We just assumed that it would, would be okay. And it needed tuning. It was just, we just didn't think it through. And I think that's the risk. And like that, the gentleman who I was saying, who had been given a mobile phone but couldn't even text with it. So the assumption that it's all easy. We know it's easy, but you can't tell someone, "Oh, just do it, it's easy." So I think it's giving them that confidence. And quite often, just that they've made that first step in contacting Leep to gain support is hugely significant.
Thank you. Absolutely. And I thought that's one of your slides was quite interesting, because you put you highlighted the benefits of online, being online. And these are all things that we do, yep. We know, but I think it's actually a slide that's very important for all of us to be able to articulate, being online is important because of this and this reason and this reason.
And it's stuff that it's just part of most of our, who are here today, being a significant part of our lives that we're just comfortable with, and we don't, we take it for granted. And it's, you've got to get yourself into the learner's mindset that this is not something they're comfortable with or familiar with.
Absolutely. Let me have a look if there's any more question. I don't think so. So for everyone who's listening, if you have any last pressing question, please do post it in the chat now. I think, Stephen, you've covered a lot of very interesting things and really encourage us to question these assumptions that we all have.
Yeah.
And
so what I'll do is I'll email Lauren with the presentation, but also with the flyers for recruiting learners as well as recruiting tech mates, and the information is there. So even if you don't circulate the flyers, you personally or your organisation has that information at hand. So, and thank you for not making the questions too difficult as well. I hope my bookcase was interesting. I know when I'm watching some of the commentaries on TV, and I think it was Alan Kohler on the ABC always used to have 3 books on his desk, and my wife and I'd pay more attention trying to work out what the books were than what he was actually saying, because it would change each night and there'd be some theme to them. It was really interesting. So it was a bit like a cryptic puzzle. So I don't think my bookshelf is very cryptic, but anyway.
Well,
but thanks again. I've really, really enjoyed it, and I've appreciated the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Stephen. And I thought that was a really good presentation, especially because you presented some solutions and how we can work collectively to address this digital divide. So I hope that everyone who attended the webinar was also inspired by Leep's mission. Yes, so thank you so much for your attendance and participation today. And as mentioned by Stephen, we will be sharing the slides, the flyer, and everything that Stephen sends me. I will send it to the participants of today.